Hello folks, with the recent changes as part of the June 20th update has sparked many new builds to be created, especially for engineers with the rifle update. Though there's been changes to Mechanist with the building choice to add Quickness to Jade Mortar with some funky interactions and some sickness there. In the street choices, it is now possible to get 100% uptime on Quickness and Alacrity, something which only Chronomancers were able to do in the past. For the build itself, we are running mostly full berserkers with scholar runes. You can run other things such as full diviners or commanders or knights for more survivability, but this is just the template I use for most of my builds and fractals and raids and so on. So it's just for ease of use, mostly. The runes itself, we're using scholars. You can use fireworks, would probably work quite well as you get vigor, fury, as well as a few other stacks of might, which will help this build along. For the runes itself, we're using force and air. You can also use concentration, as well as impact or night and paralyzation with the build, with the shield, sorry. For the jewelry itself, we're just using full diviners with the backpack being berserkers as well. So you really don't need a massive amount of concentration to keep full uptime. To briefly go over the food items, you can use soul pastries with toxic maintenance oil or potent master maintenance oil. But you can also just use sweet and spicy butternut squash soup or the shopping sims, as they're just good damage alternatives, though perhaps maybe a bit more expensive. For the build itself, we are taking explosive, tools, and mechanist. Going into the first trait line, it is probably something that if you're a more experienced engineer are questioning already, which is short fuse. This is purely just to keep 100% fury uptime on ourselves in the open world. It's nothing spectacular, it's not a fantastic trait. Over glass cannon, it's an extra 10% damage boost, which is wonderful, but the 100% fury uptime is definitely more damage than if you were to just take glass cannon. In the second trait line, aim assisted rocket is definitely a very good contender, but I'll come back to this later. Explosive temper is good. It's about 120 extra ferocity, as we aren't able to get full stacks of explosive temper, as we'll only really be getting the stacks from the third attack on your mace melee, which will allow us to keep around 5 to 6 stacks. If you really want to, you can take Blast Shield for more survival, but it's ultimately up to you. And for the third trait line, there isn't really much choice here. Big Boomers is a fantastic choice, 10% extra damage and healing over time. Tools is quite a underlooked trait line for engineers. It's outperformed at damage with firearms and explosives and doesn't really quite provide enough support for supports to really look into. It doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, it's probably one of the most important trait lines in this build itself. The first trait line in of itself isn't fantastic. We take Static Discharge, which is whenever we use one of our mech skills, it does additional damage, and it does double crit damage. So right here it does 215 damage, doubled it up, it is 645 damage. So it's nothing amazing, but it does build up over time. We can also take the Lesser Utility Goggles. It's just more stomach for the open world. Utility goggles, as many of you know, is basically useless otherwise, so it's not fantastic. You can take Power Wrench as well, but it's only really effective on Overclock Signet. So if you plan on using Overclock Signet a lot, you can take it, but I just say the consistency of Static Discharge is better. Mechanized deployment is something that is probably essential for this build, really. The extra 15% extra cooldown on all your tool build skills, which includes mech skills, is what makes this so fantastic and is one of the main reasons we took the tools trait line. For the second trait line, all of these options in reality are just okay. Long fuse powder pack is more damage every 10 seconds. It's more effective if you're fighting large groups of enemies, which is good if you're on like a meta train and just want a little bit of extra damage every so often. For most solo content, and controlled analysis from lock-on is a good choice as well, as it just provides more vulnerability to the enemy, providing you with a little bit of fury. With the fireworks runes, or the pack runes as well, the fury given by that, you could take this and replace short fuse with glass cannon or grenadier if you want to take grenades. And in the third trait line for tools is probably the most important trait we can choose, which is kinetic battery. Kinetic battery works by every time we use a 2-build skill, in this case a mech skill, it will build up a stack, and whenever it hits 5 stacks, we'll gain 7 seconds of quickness and 5 seconds of super speed, which is very good and will be more evident why it's so good whenever we get into the Mechanist tree and down into the dreaded Mechanist tree itself. This first row is honestly take whatever you want. The high impact drivers for the mech arms provides a little bit of extra might and has a shorter cooldown than the other two options, which it can be useful. You can also take Spark Revolver, but I will come back to this in a wee second. For the second choice, Crisis Zone. There's really no other choice. Crisis Zone is just fantastic for open world. It provides you with more alacrity. Your mech provides alacrity on hits, aegis, stability, protection, quickness, and it also breaks you out of your stun if you're in CC. So it's just, for open world, is not even comparable with the other two options. For the third trait line, though, this is the main reason why this build is even possible. In the 20th of June update, they added changes to the Jade Dynamo tree, which gives Mechanist more quickness whenever you use a mech skill. What they didn't, however, account for is Shift Signet. If you read Shift Signet here, you'll see that boons that you gain are copied to your mech, but it also works vice versa, so boons that your mech gains go to you. So, in combination with Jade Mortar, the quickness that our mech gets, we also get, which allows us to maintain a full quickness. It's a little bit busted. It's not really too good outside of open world, seeing as you'll have someone providing quickness and alacrity anyway, but it's something that was only available to Chronomancers in the past is now available to Mechanists, which is, it's a bit nutty to say the truth. The additional changes, I mentioned aim assisted rocket and spark revolver. Those of you that play Mechanist know that there is currently interactions between spark revolver and aim assisted rocket, where because there's no, it doesn't, you don't need to be at the distance for this, the trick, you see it there, there's no range threshold on aim assisted rocket, so you just get tons of damage from the orbital command strike and aim assisted rocket. That is just more than anything else, as well as just the massive damage you get from spark revolver. It does a lot over time, so you can take that if you prefer, but I'm just rocking explosive knuckle and explosive temper for a little bit of a boost. You can also take, I mentioned Grenadier as well. Grenadier is actually really, really good. It's just as we're not taking a kit, generally, we don't take it. So you do lose out on the fury, but if you're in a big zerg, it makes tiny mobs so much easier. It also makes your heal skill do a burst around you, but you do lose out on your fury uptime, which is important to bear in mind. Something else as well that I forgot to mention is that in the tools trait line, these two trait lines are one of the worst options. The best option is streamlined kits, but as we don't really take a kit, there's no real point in taking it. For if you do plan on taking a grenade kit, you do want to take streamlined kits. The additional RNG buffs that you give you, magnetic bomb, drop mine, super speed, magnetic ore, all that are just all really good and on a relatively short cooldown for what it is. And it also works past the 50% threshold that takedown round also requires. So if you do plan on running grenade kit with this, yes, you do want to change this over to streamlined kits. Other than that, the build itself is incredibly easy to play. Get your boons up and use your abilities with cooldown. Make sure you don't interrupt your auto chain, so make sure you get your barrier blast off, as it gives you barrier and keeps more alacrity as well as counting against an explosive. You also want to make sure to not use overclock signet or your mace 3 whenever one of your mech skills is off cooldown. You only use these two abilities if these three are all on cooldown. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed this quick guide. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions, or mail me in game at fintinbin3415. I'm going to leave you with me just hitting on a golem to see this build in action. Hope you enjoyed, and take care.